there, it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we are going to make a reversible drawstring bag. I am making this because my clothespin bag just broke. I'm right in the middle of doing laundry, and I thought, what the heck, I can do laundry and make a bag at the same time, hey? So what we are going to do is make something like this, and it's reversible too. So if you choose to have two colors of lining and outer layer, or if you want to have maybe a print on the outside and a solid in the inside and change it up. I happen to have a cotton on the outside and a waterproof canvas on the inside. Not for any real specific reason, but just because I can't interface anything because my iron is dead. So this is just plain cotton, no interfacing. And this is waterproof canvas to get it some body. So if you have two layers of cotton, make sure you interface them both. And you'll end up with something pretty strong. Now this one is reversible because if you turn it out, it looks pretty much the same as it does on the outside as the inside. The inside's finished off. The outside's finished off, and the drawstring comes from the top so that it doesn't matter which side is facing out, the drawstring will still work. There's a different way to make this where you put a band on top, and the band has buttonholes about here on both sides, and that makes it reversible too. I found this way to be just quicker, so that's why I did this one. Now, when it comes to size, I used 2 pieces of fabric for the outside and 2 pieces for the inside, and they were 15.5 inches by 13 inches, and that gave me enough room for a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. You can make this any size you want. The reason I chose that size was because I knew I had probably 2 containers of clothespins that I had to fit in here. So I wrapped fabric around this tub and gave it some space and decided that I would use 13 inches as my width. So if you're looking for something specific, you know, maybe your tub is bigger than mine, you can always measure it, or you can always just wrap your fabric around it and guess how much you need so that you can get this tub in here. So the way this bag is built, I can get 2 tubs worth of clothespins in here, no problem. And I'll be set to go. So if you have any questions about your sizes, just leave a note at the bottom or ask me. There's a Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group that you can ask questions into. So if you have any trouble with figuring out your sizes, let me know. But like I said, all my fabrics for this one are 13 wide and 15.5 tall. And I did 2 outsides and 2 insides. So the only supplies we need are interfacing, 2 fabrics, or you could do inside and outside exactly the same, and something to use for a cord. This is twill tape, it's 1 inch wide. You don't have to use that. You can use an actual cord, and that'll work too. So let's get started sewing. We're not going to need very much for this project. What we do need, I'm going to use this fancy striped fabric for the outside, and I have an iron-on interfacing that would make this stiffer, but the only problem is my iron isn't working, so I'm going to try it without interfacing this cotton. If you have cotton for the inside and the outside, I would recommend using interfacing for both the layers. To add a little bit of stiffness to this, I'm going to use this waterproof, it's polyester, but you know, sometimes they say waterproof canvas. It's a bit lightweight, so it's good for lining. And maybe it'll be good to keep the water, you know, some of the water out, keep it clean. This is going to be a clothespin bag, but I'm not going to leave it outside because things get too messy outside. And I don't want to be washing it all the time. I don't want it dirty. I just want to be able to store my pins and walk in and out with them all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to make basically a lined drawstring bag. For the drawstrings, I have this really wide stuff here that I just might use. And I have bias tape and twill tape. This looks like the exact same thing as this. Yes, it is. So I've got twill tape and I've got bias tape. If you don't have the twill tape, you can use the bias tape. I would recommend using a really wide one though. How wide is this one? Let's see, this is 1/2 inch. And you know, one end is a fold and the other end is open. So the open end I would sew shut so it would look more like a cord. And if you have cord, you can use cord too, but I'm trying to make this with things that I have at home already. The bias tape would work and this would work. When I want to know the length, it all depends on how big your little drawstring bag is going to be. If you make it here, it would cover this, but I would like to have a little bit left over, so I'm going to make it a bit longer so that I have room not only to cover the width, but I can tie a knot in here and have some extra, because I don't want it tight, snug. I want to have some extra on the end. So when it comes time to stick the drawstring in, I'll probably have it cut here. That comes later. For now, let's make basically 2 bags. And then after, put this in here before I lose it. After we make the 2 bags, we will put them together. So when we're sewing this together, we want the right sides together. And we're going to sew down, across the bottom, and up the side. And that'll take care of this one. We're going to leave the top open. And that's going to be the outside of the bag. I am going to not only sew 1/2 inch, but I'm going to zigzag too, because there's probably a chance of a lot of fraying with this. Now with this one, this is the lining. One side is kind of rubber looking. That's the wrong side. This is the right side that's got a bit of a grain look to it. And so I put my right sides together and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to sew down the side, across the bottom, and up to the top, and I'm going to zigzag too. The reason why we don't need a turning hole for this one is because I've decided I'm going to leave a turning hole at the top when I'm putting these 2 pieces together. So I'll show you that later, but for now, I'd like you to do the exact same thing with both layers, down, across the bottom, and the top. It makes your back stitch here because you really want this to hold at the top. Okay, I've got this sewn now. I sewed it and I zigzagged it. It's a 1/2 inch seam allowance because that's what I like to do. And I'm going to turn it inside out, and if my iron was working, I would say let's go poke the corners out and press this so that at least we have 1/2 a chance of it looking decent when we are finished. But my iron is cold. It's dead. So there is going to be no ironing today, but you know, I'd advise you to iron. Now the other cute little thing I've got is this little corner poker thingy here. Let me be careful with the cotton. It breaks easy. And there's a sharp point on here. But this is pretty cool because it's got a round end for curves, which you could put a curve in this too if you wanted, but I like the little sharp corner. And it's got the pokey for the sharp corner. So this is this bag done. I've turned it out. I should press it, but I can't. I've marked the halfway point, which on this one is 1/2 of 12 is 6. So 6 inches on both sides. And I'm going to leave this like this. This is my other piece. It's been sewed too. And I've put some markings on here that I will explain. This is the wrong side. And the right side is in here. So I'm going to put right sides together. That means this right side is going inside this wrong side that's facing out. But we still have right sides together. Now I can use pins on this because this is all going to be seam allowance. Some pins, just to show you the markings. This is the 6 inches and that's the 6 inches. Let's line that up. I can't see it because of black. I ended up with black being on the edge. And this is our seam allowance. And I like to line those up. And here's my center again. At least I can see this one. It's not on black. And I can line that up. And here again. Now when I'm running the cord through, I'm going one way with the cord. So if I go this way with the cord and come here, I want to go this way with the cord too. So I want to bend this that way and try and, you know, it's not easy sometimes, but the heavier fabric should have this obstruction facing the way the cord is running when I push it through. It might make life easier. My markings. If this was going to be a reversible bag, I would want the buttonholes to be on the very top edge. Okay, I'm still sewing a 1/2 inch seam allowance up here, but I'm going to start here. I don't know if you can see that. I found the center, 1 inch on each side. I did a 1 inch opening for a buttonhole. Now I don't mean a traditional buttonhole, I mean just a gap that I can run the thread, the rope, whatever you're using, the cord through. So I'm not going to sew here so I can run the cable through, cord, whatever it's called. So this is a center, and 1/2 inch on each side makes these gaps nicely centered. 6 inches, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. 6 inches, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. So I'm going to sew between here with 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to start sewing here and go this way all the way around, where I've also marked 2 inches on each side. I did 2 inches just because this is heavy. You might want to just do, you know, 1 inch on each side if you're using cotton. If you've got something lightweight, you don't have to have such a big a gap, but I'm using this heavy waterproof stuff, so I do need a big gap. So I'm going to stop sewing here and leave a big gap in the middle. So big gap here for turning, and 2 little gaps here so that I can pull the cord through. So I'm going to sew this now. So we have sewed it together. You can see on this side I've left a large opening so I can pull it through, because you know this is going to be tough. It's really noisy and plasticky. So I do have the right sides together because I turned this bag, remember? So the right side was out, and I left this one with the wrong side out. And then when I put the two together, the right sides are together. So when we turn it, it's going to be right sides together too. This side, I have left 2 little holes. They might be a bit too small, but I don't mind if my soft twill tape, it's about 1 inch wide, I don't mind if it gets a little bit twisted when it comes out the hole. So now I have to pull this through and turn it. And it's pulled through. Now, if I had an iron, I would press it again. And I would press the lining too, but of course I'll never be able to press this because it's all plasticky. And I would press this to show that this is where I want to sew it together nicely. I always like pressing this seam down, so when I do close the bag or anything up, I've got a nice sharp edge and it's sort of stuck together already because it's been pressed. But for now, I'm going to leave this in. I only pulled it out to show you that you really should press it right now. And if you really think it got all wrinkled during all that process, you can press it again. So now, how do we finish this off? Well, first of all, we do not sew closed our little gaps here. Never, never, never. Okay? Because if we do It's not going to be good. So I'm going to pin all along the top and pin so that I know where the gaps are, because I don't want to sew them shut. So let me pin first and then I'll come back and talk to you. So I've put my pins in. I put them all the way across the back to close the turning hole. And I put them almost all the way across the front. This is my gap here and here for when I'm threading my twill tape through. I've got twill tape. So I'm not going to sew those gaps shut, but I will start here, go around, stop here, and then do this little spot in here. Okay, and make sure you back stitch or tie off your ends or do something so it doesn't unravel on you. And after I do that round, I'm going to do the same thing over again, except I'm going to make sure that it's 1 inch away. I think 1 inch might be good enough for my, let's see how wide this is. If I'm using something this wide, I'll probably want, I can see, you know, you look at it and you can see that it's exactly 1 inch. So I have to leave a little bit of space at the top and the bottom. So really I should be doing it at 1.5 inch because that'll give me some room. You don't want to have a tight space for dragging your twill tape through. If you had something skinnier like 1/2 inch, you would still want to make maybe 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch space so you could drag it through. So after I sew the top, leaving the holes, I'm going to sew the top all the way around and make sure I am at 1.5 inches. You might want to be at a different width because your tape is skinnier than mine. Don't sew up those holes though. You can sew the second row of stitching all the way around, but not the first row of stitching. So I edge stitched all around and it's nice and sharp now. See how sharp it is? And I did it from here all the way through, sealing the back hole. And here, I've left these open here so that I can thread the ribbon through whatever you've got, twill tape. Over here, I did a square right in the middle of these two things because this is a stress point here. And this square will not interfere with anything because your webbing is not going past this point anyway. It's coming out here. Okay, so you can do a square here to anchor it down. And also you can stick some glue on your ends here if you're thinking that maybe with use it might pop open. The next thing I have to do is measure down. I said 1.5 inches and go all the way around. And then we'll be pretty much finished the bag. We just have to thread the twill tape or whatever cord you're using through. I wish I had an iron. Doesn't that look a little wrinkly? Okay, it's finished. I have, maybe you can see better on this side than the pattern side, but I have sewn 1.5 inch. I've edge stitched to keep it nice and uniform, not rolling, sharp. And this is the casing for our twill tape to go through. Mine is at 1.5 inch because I have really wide twill tape. So you'll see that we've got on this side the two openings to drag the twill tape through from one side to the other side. I think I've got a gizmo that helps me do that. I just have to find it like all my gizmos. Now this is truly reversible because if I turn it, it's still going to work. Okay, because I have the drawstring coming from the top edge. There are other ways to do a reversible drawstring bag, but I find this way to be the quickest because you just leave a bit of a gap in the top to draw everything through. So I'm going to run my drawstring through and then I'll come back and we can talk about how long we need it to be. Look at that, I found my gizmo. Basically you safety pin to one end, whatever you want to drag through, and use this hard end to drag it through. I like this one because it's got a bit of a curve on it, so it sort of goes around the bag. But now I've got to watch out for, oh, it went through. You know, the seam allowances that we bent one way and another, got to look out for those. But basically, you get it around here, and pretty soon you're at the soft part of this plastic, and it sits in a nice circle. I don't know how long I've had this thing. And I always overshoot the second hole. So let's go back here and get it out the second hole. There. So now when we drag it through, this is going to follow after it. Just as long as we get it in there nicely. Get it started. There. So pulling this through, just as long as your safety pin doesn't open, which has happened before, it'll go through nicely. Now it's all the way through. I'm going to put a couple of extra inches down here. Here's my safety pin I have to take off. And I'll cut a couple of extra inches off this. Okay, so I've got it cut off. You can tie a knot in the end of this. If you want to, you can sew it. I'm just going to tie a knot, and then after I tie the knot, I'm going to work it around so the knot's inside and not hanging out. I would prefer just to have a loop hanging out. So I'll tie a knot in this end, make sure it's secure. If you're worried about it coming loose, then make sure you sew it a little bit, do something with it. But I'm just going to use a knot for now. And I'm going to work it so that it ends up with the knot inside. I don't really want the knot showing outside. It'll fray less if it's inside too. I won't see it anyway if all the threads are hanging off of it. You could always put some glue on the ends if you don't like the fraying, if yours frays too much. When you're sewing these two, we did a little box here so it wouldn't, you know, like come loose. If you wanted to, when you were sewing this, before you did everything, way back when you were doing the edge stitch, you could have put a little tiny box here too to secure the end of your edge stitching. But I'm not worried about my edge stitching. But that's another thing you can do if you're worried about the security of this. So now I'm just going to work this through to the inside, and then I am going to fill it up with my clothespins and get my laundry done. So how'd that go? I really want to see your projects, okay? So make sure you post them in the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group, and I'll leave the link below in the comments, the notes. And if you have any questions, make sure you put them down below or leave them in the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group, and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Well, I think it's time for me to pack this up and go get that laundry finished. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.